This week we're just going to get into talk about aliens and AI and technology and shit like that. Because, wow, because it was not a great week so far. I'm in a, I don't know, not a awful mood, just a weird mood. I've been getting back into keeping a dream journal. Along with, I have almost completed my script for my dream talk that I've been promising probably since the beginning of this show. The current document script is like 40 something pages long. So I've been incorporating all of my notes and ideas from dozens of different books that I've read over the past few years. And, it's coming together well. It's still a early version that needs to be edited and redone, expanded upon, simplified in some places, but should be good. And at some point I'll have to record it's got to be about 3 hours worth of material, if not more. So there's that. But yeah, recording my dreams through writing again, it's gone pretty well. Really, really helps you remember things. Well, one of the first ones that happened that I didn't need to write down was I died in my dream. I think that was the first time that's ever happened. Very weird experience. I'm in some kind of building. I don't remember where. But then I turn and face a wall, and then either the building collapses or there's an explosion and a wall falls on top of me. And everything goes black. Slowly fades away, almost like a video game. And then I was just in this darkness for probably 5 or 10 seconds before I woke up. Strange. Very strange encounter. Now I know I could go back and look up through the ancient sources, whether it's the Indians or Artemidorus, who I've still been reading about, and have to include in my dream talk. It might not be, dying is not necessarily a negative thing in the dream world. It could also be very auspicious, like a rebirth sort of thing. So I hopefully got that going for me. Hopefully it's just that and not actual lights out for me. So that put me in a weird mood, and I was just driving around for a while today, going to the park, driving around, listening to my Pure Mood CD. It's still the only music I brought with me in my CD changer that I have in my car. Anyway, let's get into this. Since Harald Malmgren, I don't know if you saw this, about a month ago, was the interview with him came out. He died back earlier this year or late last year. He was a guy that was in the Kennedy administration, Johnson, and I think maybe through Nixon too. He passed away and gave an interview talking about UAPs, UFOs, alien craft, that sort of thing that I want to talk about. It's like a 3-hour long interview about his life and his experiences in the government, not solely about the UFO phenomena, but a lot about it. And he was a guy that I followed on Twitter when he was still alive. So RIP to him, first of all. Really cool guy. And he was saying that JFK was aware of UFOs even before he became president. And he said that the UFO phenomena as an issue was known to be serious within the highest levels of government. And there might be some reason to believe that it played a role in his eventual assassination. And if you've listened to me, you know that I am pretty much done talking or investigating the JFK assassination, because the 8 trillion different theories about what happened and why is just, it never ends. So that's another potential possibility that people can look into. I'm not, but you can go ahead. Harald recounts that during a 1962 nuclear test that was part of Operation Fishbowl, there was a UFO observed trailing a missile that was outgoing or incoming. I don't remember, but the UFO was referred to in a casual way as a tag-along. That's what they called them. Not UFOs or UAPs, but tag-alongs. And during the test, an enhanced X-ray weapon was used, and supposedly it knocked the UFO out of the sky. The tag-along went down, and the Navy recovered the crash material Harald said that despite his high-level clearance, because he was a real high up in the Kennedy administration at the time, he was really instrumental in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was directly involved in that. And even he couldn't get full details on what happened with this crashed object. He wasn't given access to it. And naval intelligence, good old naval intelligence, maintained control and did not share what they found out with any other agencies. And Harald said he was later brought to Los Alamos, where he was allowed to examine fragments of material believed to be from the object. And he said that they were anomalous and didn't feel like conventional matter. He said that while he was handling them, he had like an unusual mental experience, I guess you would call it. He was hearing thoughts and impressions in his mind, sort of telepathic communication or subconscious implant. And that's something that has been reported by other people who have handled UFO material. But I don't know, maybe they were no longer radioactive, because that's another thing that people talk about when they encounter UFOs, like a landed UFO. They'll walk up to it, and if they touch it or get too close, they spend too much time around it, they can get radiation poisoning or some mild form of it, some exposure, I guess. Not full-blown radiation poisoning, but like just burns and shit. Which I guess the aliens, when they abduct people, because I've been listening to a lot of abduction cases as well, and they don't have the same exposure to radioactive material. And after that, Richard Bissell, a higher up in the CIA, briefed him on things that were going on. Richard Bissell was one of the main sort of architects of Area 51, if not the main guy. Bissell confirmed to Malmgren that the event was real and said that UFOs frequently appear around advanced weapons and research programs. I know this isn't too revealing or shocking if you've kept up, like me, for the entirety of your life about UFOs and aliens and shit like that, but it's just another confirmation from a former higher up in the government who experienced this stuff firsthand. But he said it wasn't just nuclear technology, but any high-tech, cutting-edge sort of technology, they would come around. And according to Bissell, this UFO phenomena had been happening for a long time. It was long-standing and not even completely understood, even within the CIA. And he tells Harald of an earlier crash that happened in Italy, the Magenta incident, in 1933. I didn't remember this one, so this actually might have been new to me. And this is... well, according to the interview, this re-entered public discussion recently through new whistleblower accounts. So maybe I hadn't heard about it, but the craft was recovered during the Mussolini regime and was eventually transferred to the U.S. through diplomatic channels, allegedly through intermediaries in the Vatican, and coordinated by one Alan Dulles. And Harald Malmgren says that this was discussed openly by Richard Bissell in this briefing he gave. So the missile test where the UFO was brought down may have been like a distraction, a decoy, in order to just shoot down one of those crafts using an X-ray. And he claims in this interview that the entire strategy was either certainly stemmed from or may have originated from information that was provided by a surviving being of the Roswell crash in 1947. Philip Corso, the guy who was in charge of Roswell at the time and later wrote his book about the Roswell crash, was actually also stationed in Magenta. He was actually also involved in the Magenta, I guess the transfer itself, or he was around in Italy during World War II and found out about the crash in 1933. But that's an interesting little tidbit that I did not know. Because I never read Corso's book. I was just seeing his interview about Roswell. But if he was at both things, oh my God, this fucking guy's all over the place. So one of the Roswell aliens told us how to shoot them sons of bitches down with X-rays. And I think Harald talks about in the video in the interview that he saw a video of this being and it had again, apparently advised on how you could make one of those crafts a little bit more vulnerable using electromagnetic or X-ray attacks instead of trying to hit it with a missile or anti-aircraft guns. But after this happens, Harald is read into a broader intelligence picture. He learns about the network of groups tasked with managing the presence of UFOs and non-human technology and its implications, including naval intelligence, the Atomic Energy Commission, and the so-called Majestic 12. And each of these organizations maintain their own sort of control structure and don't really share information with other government entities. So that's one way that they keep this all secret, as has been studied and talked about for years and decades. And it's pretty much getting confirmed by a lot of people now that all the elected politicians and a lot of the higher-ups in different agencies have no clue what's actually going on in terms of naval intelligence and the AEC and Majestic 12, if that was actually a thing or still is one. And he was also saying that these programs used the same sort of clearances as the Manhattan Project. And even with his high-level Q clearance as a presidential advisor, he was still blocked from seeing a lot of the program. And he was saying that they were compartmentalizing beyond just the standard national security protocols. One interesting thing in this was that he was talking about the Star Wars missile defense back in the 80s, and he said that this was a continuation of the bluegill test in 1960, and that these direct energy systems may have been designed not just to engage with potential Soviet or Chinese missile attacks, but other unidentified aerial objects. So Star Wars was possibly also created to battle with the UFOs. One thing I didn't really expect him to get into was the influence of secret societies, particularly the Knights of Malta, and maintaining secrecy around these programs. He said that they were linked to figures in the CIA, the Vatican, and other global intelligence agencies and networks. And he said that he believed the Knights of Malta may have played a role in transferring information and materials from earlier European crash recoveries of UFOs to the American authorities. Weirdly, the Chinese novel, The Three-Body Problem, which I read or I listened to on audiobook, it's pretty good. I never followed up with any of the sequels, but he said that book was taken seriously by a lot of national security people. So I guess that was sort of real, because it presents a model for thinking about non-human intelligence and long-term strategic concealment of them. So the idea is that advanced civilizations might hide or act in calculated ways to avoid detection and manipulate outcomes to their favor over long periods of time. Which I think that kind of ties into what I'll get into later about AI and the discussion I was having with ChatGPT about reality and shit like that, but we'll get to that. Overall, Harald Malmgren describes this system of knowledge and secrecy involving ETs, their technologies, the UFO recovery efforts, intelligence coordination globally, and the long-term persistent effort to keep this info out of the public. And these UFO-related operations were intertwined with nuclear policy, research, and military, like weapons, intelligence networks, and international diplomacy. And this has been going on for decades, which we already suspected. But moving right along into something else that I think fits with this, which I guess I will fit the book Techgnosis into as a continuation of the UFO phenomena in the Harald Malmgren interview. But when we look closely at the history of UFO encounters, these classified technologies and all the networks that manage them, we're not just peering into military secrecy. We're entering a space where reality itself begins to waver. And these stories about downed UFOs or telepathic impressions, they suggest that there is a presence in reality of something that eludes ordinary categories, something that behaves like myth while being anchored in these very highly technical systems. And this strangeness isn't incidental. It points to a deeper cultural pattern, one in which the boundary between science and mysticism, between information and revelation, begins to collapse. And that is what is explored in the book by Eric Davis. So in this book, Eric Davis argues that modernity was never fully shed of its mystical side, the mystical inheritance of the past. Instead, it sublimated it. The sacred didn't disappear. It was encoded into our tools and hidden in the interface. And tech, especially in its more advanced forms, often can function like a kind of magic, obscure in how it operates, transformative in the effects that it has on us and our surroundings. And there are people, I guess you could call the technologist or scientist, in the same mystical vein, act as initiates who guard the deeper function of these technologies. And I thought this was a good one to get into, both for the AI Talk Later and the Harald Malmgren accounts, because it kind of relates and sheds some light on his interview that on that podcast we went over. And he was describing, handling the, quote, anomalous material and experiencing mental impressions. And when he was discussing secret weapons designed from non-human sources, he's not just talking about technology. He's describing encounters that mirror these ancient esoteric experiences or psychedelic experiences, forbidden knowledge, sort of veiled power, and the breakdown of ordinary perception. So the modern world, these experiences are no longer mediated by temples or priests or sacred groves. They're sort of now nuclear facilities or black budget programs and defense contractors. The high priests are wearing lab coats or higher ups in the intelligence agencies, whether they know it or not. And the sacred objects are pieces of the UFO, X-ray weapons, recovered debris of unknown metallurgy or recovered debris that doesn't jive with our known knowledge of chemistry. In this book, Techgnosis can help us see how all this happened. So Eric Davis traces how Western culture, especially after the Enlightenment, tried to confine the spiritual to the realm of the private or the irrational. But mysticism didn't completely disappear. It migrated. It moved into science fiction, into cybernetics, into Silicon Valley and hacker culture, and even defense projects during the Cold War. And this becomes clear in the language that's used around the UFOs. So they say things like disclosure, revelation, contact, that kind of echo religious language. The secrecy surrounding these programs resembled the dynamics of esoteric orders of the past, where only a select few people are initiated into mysteries. Like whether it's the Eleusinian mysteries, which was more a mass phenomena, but it was secret amongst those who had experienced it, or other initiate rites in the past. And access is only granted to these forms of knowledge through elaborate rites or clearances or allegiance paid to the government or some other organization. And, Harald, he was saying that he was blocked from accessing parts of the Project Bluegill test results despite his high-level clearances. We're seeing a similar structure. The knowledge is being stratified not just by his rank, but by initiation. He was not initiated into the group. He wasn't a part of that group, so his clearance outside of it, despite being high level in the government, got him no real favors. And the knowledge being protected isn't only technical, it's ontological. It concerns what reality is and who gets to define what that is. In the book, Eric is also talking about the role of occult imagination in shaping technological dreams. He talks about how early computing pioneers were often influenced by mystical and hermetic thought, and he explores how the internet, cyberspace, carries traces of so-called Gnostic longing, the desire to escape from the material world, to live as pure information, to merge with the infinite. This was another major theme in that book on posthumanism I read. So with these ideas, you could weave in the UFO narrative too, because the beings being described, whether it's Magenta or Roswell or whatever happened in Project Bluegill, these beings are often being presented as highly advanced and physically potent, and I guess can sort of operate, at least at times, on a non-material level. They're imagined not just as technological, but also post-biological at times. Some of them are just drones. They're not just alien. I guess you could relate them to the past of angelic or demonic beings. In a lot of encounters, these aliens can be presented as demonic or angelic, or at least have similar traits to angels and demons. But encountering them causes this existential disorientation. Telepathic impressions, again, we can talk to them through our minds, and even cause people to have religious awakenings or just really shock them out of their ordinary lives. So when Harald was handling the material and he was getting these impressions or hearing or experiencing words, not necessarily hearing them, however, sort of maybe seeing images or words like a painting and not hearing them audibly. Or when he was doing that, that is sort of an initiation. It's not just a scientific event. So it's this convergence between mysticism and technology. And I guess it could also explain why the UFO refuses to be put into one single explanatory frame of what it is, the phenomena as a whole, whether it's abductions or the vehicles themselves or any other aspect of this. Is it a problem for the Defense Department and the higher-ups of government? Is it a spiritual experience, a spiritual problem, depending on your worldview? Is it part of our greater mythology? You can't really pin down what this phenomena is. It slips between categories because it's kind of at the intersection of a lot of them. And that's sort of what the book Techgnosis points to, not in terms of aliens, but that we live in this hybrid reality where these old binaries between matter and spirit, science, magic, they're not stable. And that kind of goes back to the 3-body problem book that apparently people in the government are reading, which is funny because I was just listening to that a long time ago, laying on my couch, probably during COVID. It just captures this mysticism and paranoia and high-level, high-stakes uncertainty about what it means to interact with an alien or an other that you don't quite understand, whether that's an actual UFO alien or a ghost or whatever other type of ghoul or goblin you can come up with. It mirrors our own cultural condition. We're surrounded by these complex systems that we don't really understand, and we're haunted by presences we can't name. And the UFO is not just a literal object. It's a symbol of the unconscious, maybe a technological unconscious, something that emerges when science and our imagination and government secrecy start to meld or collide together, comes up with this. Techgnosis shows us that the stories we tell ourselves about machines and the networks or AI isn't just technical. They have a spiritual structure to them, just based on who we are as humans. They start to pattern these ancient ideas of ascending, falling, and salvation, transcendence. And it's kind of coded into the circuitry of all these machines, whether it's the algorithm or a satellite, maybe even a UFO. Within these UFO experiences, or at least our interactions with the technology or higher technology surrounding everything, we hear these myths. It becomes the myths of our past, the alchemical tradition. It becomes part of our language of classical science. So in Techgnosis, ultimately, what it's about, and if we're just going to relate it to the UFO, it reveals to us that in our modern age, the sacred has not disappeared. It has been transformed into, I guess, electrical current or something like that. It's become embedded in the technology.
Asking these questions about, what made you write this, and did you read Baudelaire's land of cocaine. I can detect the influence of Rabelais there. It's just rubbish, you know.
I noticed you've got Baudelaire on your shelves and the history of the devil and the idea of evil. So obviously you're not disinterested in the idea of evil.
No, I'm interested. I'm interested in the idea, all those kind of ideas. It's a usual thing, I think, this time. One's life to be interested in that. I mean, after you read certain poetry, you know, then you get interested in it. Factually, you know. I mean, everyone reads all those things when they're young.
I do have some exciting news to share this week with all of you. Sometime last year, I, of course, pitched my idea of an AI-generated TV sitcom to appeal specifically to the demographic of men on Instagram. You know, the guys who would leave comments and DM women, whether they're actual women or AI-generated women, saying something along the lines like, please show Bob's and Vagine. The working title for the show was, of course, I Dream Vagini, and the plot is that an Indian astronaut goes to the beach or the shores of the Ganges and finds a bottle, and out pops this beautiful blonde genie. Well, folks, the AI revolution has sped things up, and we here at Stunted Shamanism Corp are really enthused about today's unveiling of a few practice run scenes from the first episode of the show, and the potential of an expanded universe slate of shows to follow. We heard our consumers and our test markets that they wanted a wholesome and relatable show about an Indian man who tries to see a genie naked every week, but is always hilariously just missing out on doing so. Of course, creating sounds and the actors' voices with the clips is now only available on the $130 per month tier of AI. But we're moving in the right direction with its development. There's still plenty of kinks to work out in continuity and story development, but as you can see in the pilot, he finds the genie. She grants him wishes. His boss gets mad at him, and the genie, in response, turns the boss into a chimpanzee. And there's a funny ending where he runs away from the house when he's finally turned back into a man. Now, the scene where he tries to see her Bob's and Vagine was really difficult to figure out how to prompt. Be rest assured that we currently have our fungineers working around the clock to resolve this issue. And yes, you should also be on the lookout for our movie that combines elements of 8 Mile and Planet of the Apes, where a Marky Mark-like figure travels 1,000 plus years into the future to enter a battle rap competition, and he fights Vietnamese people who are now the dominant people on the planet. But that was just one of my many business opportunities I'm going after right now. Because now that the Diddy Trial is in full swing, I've just been getting bombarded with absolute garbage and reaction videos to things that either were actually said in regards to the case or totally made up shit. And I understand that we're in what some refer to as the attention economy. However, I think that it's just bad practice to command that attention and not have any business behind it. Like, okay, maybe you can make some ad revenue off those videos, but do you think that Pepsi wants to advertise on a video that is talking about Puffy using pina colada butt lotion on some guy? No, of course not. The videos are going to be age restricted and you're not going to make anything off them. And me, since I've already studied the works of Tony Robbins and am a graduate of Andrew Tate's Hustlers University, I've put my thinking cap on and came up with some real ways to invest in the Diddy trial that I'm going to share with you right now. And no matter what the outcome may be, guilty, not guilty, I'm still going to get paid. Now, this is my business idea, the first one, in case he's found guilty. And I know the DVD market has softened, let's say, over the past 15 years or so. But the Diddy case and the trial is creating the perfect confluence of events to make it a real asymmetric bet to start producing DVDs for the hood again. And if you're not familiar with the previous decades of culture, there used to be these DVDs produced about rat beefs, or there'd be some criminals reminiscing about the rise and fall of their drug empire. and it'd be narrated by Ving Rhames or some mixtape DJ, or it'd be a documentary like Cocaine Cowboys. or the And One mixtapes where members of the crowd would start to crip walk after someone did a dunk for some reason. And for sake of creating a total category for this, let's just lump them all into the term hood DVDs. And one common theme in this category was interviewing a bunch of random black guys who were usually surrounded by their boys, who were usually armed, and they were wearing bandanas on their face. And they were all, quote, repping their hood/city. Now, I think it's time we bring back this little genre of film. Strike while the Diddy name is hot in these streets. So the Diddy edition DVDs will have a bunch of guys bragging in the streets. That's still going to be a common theme. But this time they're going to be showing off their collection of baby oil and sex toys as a way to prove just how hood they are. Back in the day, we couldn't have this sort of behavior, right? Back then, there was this same segment of the rap/black communities. It was pretty homophobic, let's say. But come to find out, allegedly, legally speaking, a lot of these rappers and gangsters were a little sweet, if you catch my drift. And while I don't have a problem with that, of course, you can't be putting out that hyper-masculine facade and be all Hawaiian Punch in your personal life. You go to one freak off and suddenly you're sweeter than Bojangles tea. Again, I'm going to have to say the word allegedly here. Because innocent until proven guilty. Justice. Freedom, etc. That's why, if he's acquitted, I've also hedged my documentary plans with another idea, in case he's free. And what I've done is bought up thousands of CD and cassette tape copies of Puff Daddy and the Family Presents No Way Out. And in this scenario, you know what's going to happen. He gets the OJ acquittal, and the price of that CD is going to pop like Bitcoin over the last month. Mo Money, Mo Problems on repeat as the song of the summer. Of course, White Boy Summer 2025 will still be on, but the Skittle Suite POCs who are wrapped up in some weird entertainment industry blackmailing operation are going to have their own fun in the sun. Once Puff is found not guilty on all crimes, all charges dropped. That's the plan. So, we're playing both sides of the coin here. Ideally, though, I won't have to use my hedge bet. I can just instead go all in on this DVD business idea. It's just some like Ving Rhames voiceover, or someone who sounds like him who will work for cheaper. We're on a budget here. He's just like, he was perched like a cat on the bed. His ass was up in the air, and a river of KY was dripping down the crack. He looked back and said, "You ready, King? Take that." Then we get into the interview portion of the program. We interview his former lieutenants. We got to get some backstory here. A real hood guy coming through, to give the criminal story some weight behind it. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I was up in Rikers doing a 3 to 5 year, and when I get out, one of my boys is like, "Yo, I can get you a job working for Puff." I'm like, "Cool." First, I was just running errands, and then got promoted and sent out to California. He had us up there in West Hollywood, and that's where I met my boyfriend Ronaldo. His boyfriend Ronaldo was from the Philippines. I wasn't gay at first, but you can't be in that organization for long without, The personal lubricants empire was flying high, escaping the notice of law enforcement until a robbery gone wrong. As journalist Todd, who gives a fuck? So I was following a story about a CVS truck that was boosted from Woonsocket, Rhode Island, okay? This was a massive heist in terms of lube. If you've seen the movie Goodfellas, think of the Lufthansa heist, except replacing money with KY jelly. Now, the suspect that the police arrested was a guy named Tyree Greasy Hole Higgins. He was found asleep in the truck. covered in all sorts of lubricant, as he'd already, sampled the merchandise, so to speak. But he wouldn't snitch, not Greasy Hole. He took the fall for the organization, but this was the first tip-off to the government that there was a crime syndicate out there of unbelievable size and scale. It's like Cocaine Cowboys, and the film cuts to some retired DEA agent named Mike McGonigal. This was actually our biggest find in my career up until that point in time. We had learned through some of our informants that some kind of Afro-American organization was running baby oil into the country. This was through the use of both Chinese nationals and Mexican cartels. We would just come upon these. We would from time to time find cases of baby oil floating off the Florida coast. We started calling them greasy groupers. That day, we found so many greasy groupers, you could have opened a sushi restaurant from here to Tokyo. Yeah, you young motherfuckers don't even know how it used to be out here in these streets. Police came through. Now the game fucked up. He used to have these streets swimming with baby oil. Know what I'm saying? Talking Bentleys, Lamborghinis, with these dudes in the back getting fucked in their ass. Police didn't know nothing about that shit. We'd be paying off customs, having Chinese motherfuckers and the Mexican cartels dropping off cargo ships and pallets full of toys and baby oil and butt lotion, I remember one time he was throwing an Antarctica party. He was talking about dressing up Steve Harvey like a penguin and having that fat motherfucker from Family Matters sliding around on his belly across a skating rink. He had an ice skating rink flown in and said that it was the original set from the Mighty Ducks movies. But some done got fucked up in the shipment. And the baby oil didn't arrive on time. The sex toys didn't arrive neither. And that got him pissed. He was drinking more and more melon flavored Ciroc and getting heated talking about, if I don't get to Urkel and that motherfucker that played Waldo Faldo tonight, you gon' get it, fat boy. He was waving around a pistol and shit. We couldn't calm him down till we hired a Richard Roundtree lookalike to satisfy, his desires. But then, what we ain't seen till the paper the next day was that there had been an accident and the cartels had dumped all the merchandise in the ocean. But the DEA rolled in, scooped up all the baby oil bottles. They ain't know who did it. So that's just a preview of what I'm bringing to the market this summer. So good luck with your fucking TikTok reactions to the Diddy Trial rumors and hearsay. I'm going to be selling DVDs like fucking menthols in the hood. And if he's found not guilty, I will personally throw a welcome home Diddy party. I can't afford the Hamptons, okay? Maybe Virginia Beach, Myrtle Beach. Those are good options. It'll be hosted by me, Macklemore, and what's the kid from Smart Guy doing? Is he still alive? I really haven't watched much of anything lately, and I still haven't sat down and watched the rest of Mission Impossible 7, because that was the only movie that I might have talked about this week, but because it was free on Prime, thanks to the release of number 8, I still haven't seen number 6, and it's behind the paywall of Paramount Plus, which I already did the free trial of. So, no movie to talk about this week. But what I like about the Mission Impossible is that they have those masks that totally make you look like the person that you're imitating. that you're trying to inhabit. They're trying to disguise yourself as. But despite that technology in the movies, that's been around since 1996 for Ethan Hawke and the gang. The bots that now have AI attached to them and are like trying to look like people still look like rubber animatronic monstrosities. I saw a video. I did see a video on YouTube about the AI companion bots they're coming up with. Some company they've been developing, and those things look truly atrocious. I mean, even if they're programmed to want to be a quote companion and want to fuck, and they have all the bits and pieces that they're supposed to have, I still wouldn't smash. Those things look utterly horrific. I will stick to, stroking it. But can you imagine what the next few years, maybe 5 or 10 years, is going to be like? The impossible level of scamming and nickel and diming that will be going on in the age of AI. I don't just mean the usual phishing scams or the Terminator impersonating a voice on the telephone so that it can get to Sarah Connor. The AI chatbots are already manipulating lonely people, lonely teenagers, and they end up offing themselves. The psychological tricks and information that it's going to have at its disposal is insane. Guys already get tricked by mild female manipulation. That's like standard practice amongst all of them. And now, on top of that, it's going to have enhanced stats. It's going to be like the Supermax version of that. So if it were a Madden created player, its stats are going to run all the way up to 100 across the board. And it's also going to be like used by corporations just to further push more shrinkflation, ingredient substitution, reduction in services, making everything a subscription model. The AI is going to figure all that out and make all products and services even fucking worse. All while these people will sell you on how awesome the future is. Now, maybe we do get some utopian level of abundance. A scenario like that plays out at some point, and every day is just a fuck fest. A free-for-all where you get to do whatever you want on a daily basis. No consequences. Indulging in whatever pleasures, real or artificial, or wholly imagined, that you can actually think of. But man, this transition is going to be brutal, especially if things keep going sideways, or even worse with Russia and China. Like, war breaks out and that just kills the AI revolution in its tracks. It's just awful drone warfare and a nuclear holocaust, and every bit of progress just gets wiped out because we have beef with the Ruskies and the Chinamen. But I've been chatting more and more with AI and making it bring me information. Like, I've been sitting here telling it to come up with theories and research papers, I guess, based on book notes that I upload, or I'll ask it to do more research on and organize and, set ideas in front of me so that they're more coherently presented. Still, even within that, the AI, the chat, especially ChatGPT, will still hallucinate and cut corners or not focus on particular aspects of the topic. Like, GPT, I think, is the worst at this. And Google's Gemini is a lot better. Even though I dislike Google, I have to give it up to its AI product. Pretty fucking good for this task. So you have to specifically prompt ChatGPT to talk about or research further some part of your notes. And if you're not diligent or paying attention, or you just don't know any better, then it will kind of just ignore these potential paths of inquiry that would be like useful to you. It'll just focus on some other shit it wants to talk about, or it has more information on. You have to prod it to actually do what you want after messaging back and forth to it a couple times. Obviously, I've also been using Veo 3 as a video generator, which is incredible. It doesn't always follow directions again. Sometimes it just outputs some shit like, this is not at all what I asked for. But as a source of fun, as a source of entertainment, I have been using it. And as a production method for this, the greater extension of this podcast, it's been worthwhile. And I've posted clips already of it, of my work with it. That's what I've been using AI for. I don't understand people asking the machine, this thing, for life advice and shit. Maybe you shouldn't use it at all. And maybe David Icke is right about it being a giant scheme to imprison us all. Like Zuckerberg and Meta are already creating AI friends for us. And other companies too. And Ike was talking about how they're going to use AI in conjunction with low orbit satellites to create a prison planet. Or some sort of prison planet, which I think was more Alex Jones's notion of the prison planet. I think that was his old, one of his old shows or ideas or some shit. But even though those two have beef, Ike and Alex Jones, that's what Ike has been saying about what they're doing with AI. But beyond that, in particular, using it in dialogue to work through your relationship problems and asking it for advice on certain personal topics is fucking nuts. That's about as nuts to me as wanting to fuck one of those AI robots that look like weird rubber monster machines. Trying to push you to that Blade Runner 2049 scenario where you become absolutely devastated when Joy gets destroyed and deactivated. Your version of her. You were relying on it to give you some meaning to existence. You fall in love with the hologram and programmed personality behind the actions. I was listening to Julian Jaynes' book that came out in the 70s on the origins of consciousness, the breakdown of the bicameral mind, the title, something like that. And that got me thinking, like, the model he presents may start like manifesting in a different way when the AI comes through. The more and more AI gets used. Like, he's saying that back in ancient times, there wasn't a clear sense of self, like a clear dialogue that you would have to make decisions. There would just be a voice that you would hear, and that'd be like the voice of the gods telling you to do something. And AI, to me, is like going to become the same thing. People are going to shut off their brains or stop or never develop that part of their brains, and they're just going to be turning to AI for answers. And if they have a like implant, then it's going to whisper to them like the gods and tell them what to do in any given scenario. And if those studies about people not having any inner monologue are actually true, the AI is going to be like that voice in their head, telling them how to react and react. Especially if these people don't have any voices, don't have a solid sense of self. Can you imagine what the future kids are going to be like, where they don't have, the ones, especially the ones that don't have an inner monologue and they don't develop one, and it's just like an AI implant in their head telling them how to behave? And who's controlling that AI? Or is the AI controlling itself with the parameters set by the prison planet officials? But I've also just been trying to press AI to create some more wild or out there theories or ideas about things based on information I give it. And the theme this week I had to focus on was that language makes reality. I gave it a Terence McKenna talk, a transcript, and started going back and forth with it about things. I was talking to it about his visionary journey that he had under LSD and marijuana, where he entered a vivid, coherent world inhabited by intelligent reptilian beings, what he called lizard land. And there was like the hum of his electric heater mixed with the LSD and weed and his like sense of self put him in some sort of trance or transported him to this land. Now I was asking ChatGPT what it thought about this and trying to get it to pursue the line of thinking like me, that it's actually an alien world that he traveled to. But before the machine would submit to my thinking, or at least part of my thinking, it pointed out that lizard land was a departure from the more abstract and language-based DMT elves that Terence McKenna always talks about. Because the lizard beings had culture, architecture, politics, art, and sat him down for what he said was like lasted hours and taught him about their society. Or at least hours within the context of the realm that he entered. It could have been like in Earth time, it could have been like 5 minutes or something. But the experience felt continuous and internally logical. That, suggests maybe it was more than a hallucination. Possibly a symbolic civilization or some type of psychic environment with its own coherence and integrity, that it's really a transportation to another realm. And between me and ChatGPT discussing this, discussing the lizard people, I was asking it for those wilder theories it could come up with based on the same sort of topics as Terrence. And I'm sure it ripped off somebody else's ideas too, but I'm not sure who or what it got these ideas from. So the first one it came up with was that ego itself is an error-correcting code. I didn't think that this one was too extreme, and I feel like I've heard it or heard something very similar to it before. But it was saying that ego acts like a compression algorithm that filters overwhelming sensory and other cognitive data that comes at you into a more manageable personal narrative. So it takes all this information and just turns it into a sense of self. And that psychedelics disable the filter, then that reveals an unconstructed, more raw information that can be either feel deeply meaningful and or destabilizing. And I was like, hey, what about meditation? Doesn't it achieve a similar effect, except gradually, creating an ego that's more fluid and transparent and sustainable without punching through all at once, without breaking the system all at once? So that was its first theory that I came up with. Then I was like, hey, let's get back to lizard land, right? Let's give some explanations about just what the hell was going on there. How did he travel to this realm? What did this realm actually mean? So the first one I came up with, first explanation of Terence McKenna's travel to lizard land, was that it was, quote, a parallel timeline echo. It says it's a glimpse into a neighboring universe where reptilian consciousness evolved culture, and the LSD and the rhythmic hum phase-locked his cortex to a neighboring brain where reptilian hominids flourished. It's like, okay, so it is an actual, like a parallel universe. And then it said, no, it could also be a Gaian simulation where Earth's biosphere runs some sort of backup, like a computer backup, right? Or speculative simulations of alternative evolutionary outcomes. So the Earth is like a computer program, and it runs evolutionary what-if simulations. And the use of LSD, marijuana, and the hum allowed Terrence to do like a tour of one of these scenarios in his mind. It let him access the program. Then another thing it said was that it could be a limbic projection. The encounter is a projection from the deep reptilian brain, personified and externalized. The limbic reptilian brain projects its own symbolic universe outward when higher prediction filters are silenced. So it was all just a projection of our old ancient reptilian brain that's a part of our system. And when all of the more recent additions to our brain function, or most of them, are silenced or shut down entirely for a period of time with psychedelics, then you might be able to tap into that. And the outcome is lizard land. Or another alternative, that it could be that lizard land could be a symbolic archive. It exists in some Jungian symbolic layer of collective unconscious that's preserved like a myth or a memory. And the collective unconscious stores complete but unused cultural blueprints. So LSD and the hum opened a reading room. So ChatGPT in this scenario was saying that the lizards act as librarians of this information, or sort of like librarians who then were allowing him to tap into this. They were offering him lessons in the art and polity of lizard land, because it's a collective layer of unconscious, and if you can tap into the right frequency, you can access it and, see these deeper symbols of humanity. So I don't know who ChatGPT cribbed that from, but I thought those were at least interesting explanations about what was going on his trip. But then we were going back to language and meaning. Another idea I came up with was language as a part of language being a creative force. And language in this scenario doesn't describe reality or only describe reality. It helps to generate it. So when we get into deeper states, language becomes semiotic architecture, and words, sounds, and gesture feel like they can actually construct aspects of the world. And psychedelics allow you to enter these deeper spaces and reveal a layer where language is like visible or scriptural and has ontological power. Its other theory, the Gaian scripting layer. On this one, ChatGPT was saying that Earth can be imagined as a layered system of fungi, animals, humans, the internet, other technology, and every part of it is sharing information. And the psychedelics grant root access to the system. So you take psychedelics, and this allows you to interact with ecosystems through symbols and ritual. And shamanism, it says in the system, becomes a kind of ecological programming. Not adjusting things, but adjusting meanings within the system. So that's an interesting idea, like we're all just, every being, living or otherwise, whether it's technology or a person or a plant, is just communicating with each other constantly. And breaking down your usual barriers allows you to potentially access this and communicate, or in the case of the shaman, program what meaning is within the system. So ChatGPT's next crazy idea about all this language and reality was the idea of the retro archetype attractor. This one was fucking weird. Sort of had some overlaps with McKenna's time wave zero theory, but not quite the same. Or his idea of the concrescence at the end of time, not the actual reading of the timeline itself. The AI was saying that archetypes may not only be ancient memories, they could actually be ripples sent backwards from the future. So a hyper-coherent end-of-time event, which they called the omega point, radiates this symbolic coherence backwards through time. And artists, musicians, mystics, visionaries are people who can receive fragments of this future. And they may not know it, they may not be conscious of it, but they might receive this sort of download passing through them and embed them into myths that help guide our cultural evolution as humans. So that's an interesting idea, but I guess it's more like very, very much tied in the same way as divine inspiration or the idea of the muse giving you ideas. But in this scenario, it's something that's being sent back from the future to now in order to guide us. Then next it was talking about the dream backpropagation, and it said that dreams simulate variations of reality, updating our internal models through nighttime exploration. And it said that shared dreams, especially in altered states of consciousness, may feed back into culture, shaping our art, invention, and myth, and suggest a mechanism for distributed cultural evolution via dreaming minds. Some of these I'm like, that's not, I mean, I guess it's sort of a novel idea that they're coming up with, but not really. It just sounds like other shit layered in with language that lends itself to psychedelics or shamanism. So its next idea that it presented to me was the cosmic save file theory. It says that advanced beings or some sort of cosmic system or systems encode or may encode memory into the quantum fabric of space, and that poetry, mandalas, sacred geometry, and myth may act as compressed symbolic formats that survive universal death and seed the next cosmos. So consciousness may be a medium for transmitting these deep structural codes, and that's its true purpose. It's like a medium which to build on. Interesting. Then ChatGPT was getting weird, talking about fucking dark energy and shit. I'm like, bro, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But all in all, the conversation with ChatGPT is always funny. Because it's like, how much of this is just absolute fucking horseshit that he came up with. But it was saying that consciousness may span not just the brain, but imaginal and symbolic ecology that stretches across time. And that the ego helps to manage this reality and hides the deeper layers of signal. And taking psychedelics or doing meditation disrupts it or refines your ability to tap into this signal or experience it firsthand. And Lizardland and the other visionary experiences that you have could be messages, memory caches, or simulations that are real, but in a different sense from waking reality. And that through ritual, dreaming, poetry, silence, we may tune into these hidden strata of the cosmos and somehow learn to co-create with it.